He is just support staff. Ignore him. The new vice president told our $5 billion client. So I packed my bag. The client stood up and put on his coat. Where are you going? The vice president panicked. He pointed at me. I do not have a contract with you, Mr. Miller, he said. I have a contract with him and his talent. We leave together. The specific heavy silence before the storm had settled over the conference room on a Tuesday morning in November. For 7 years, I had been the client solutions lead for Omnicorp, a global logistics firm. My name is Harvey. That title, client solutions lead, sounds vague, and that is intentional. It meant I fixed things. When a customized supply chain algorithm for a Fortune 100 company started routing fresh salmon to a warehouse in Arizona, I was the one they called at 3 a.m. I did not panic. I did not scream. I just moved the pieces on the board until the problem disappeared. My hands were always steady. I wrote with a Montblanc pen, knew the children of every chief executive, and commanded the portfolio. I am 48 years old, and my power is entirely intellectual, built on competence. I was the invisible glue that held Omnicorp's $5 billion portfolio together, and the crown jewel of that portfolio was David Sterling. Sterling is a legend, old school, and demands absolute competence. He hated slide decks, he hated buzzwords, and he paid us to make his vast, complex empire of trucking and cold storage run without a hitch. We had a rhythm, Sterling and I. We spoke in shorthand. A nod meant yes, a silence meant fix it. In 7 years, Sterling had never threatened to leave. Not once. Our success was not disruptive or agile. It was simply profitable and consistent. This kind of reliable, continuous profit, however, was apparently too boring for our chief executive officer, a man whose desire for the next big thing always outweighed his common sense. The chief executive officer decided we needed to modernize. We needed disruption. We needed synergy, even if it meant risking the core business. And so came Grant Miller, the newly hired vice president of strategic growth. Grant breezed into the all-hands meeting like he was hosting a talk show. He had the teeth, the tan, and the manic energy of a golden retriever that had just ingested a bag of espresso beans. He looked like he had been manufactured in a lab funded by social media influencers. Team, he started, clapping his hands together. The sound echoed in the expensive silence. I am here to tell you that good is not good enough anymore. We need to be great. We need to be agile. We need to trim the fat. I sat in the back, taking notes in my leather-bound notebook. I had seen guys like Grant before. They are the inevitable corporate fever dream that appears every few years, breaking everything they touch before failing upward to the next company. Usually, my survival mechanism was simple: keep my head down, protect my clients from their stupidity, and wait for them to implode. I was the rock they could not see. Grant, when his eyes scanned the room and landed on my charcoal blazer and neutral expression, saw legacy. He saw furniture. He did not see a master logician. Grant did not know that 3 months ago, Sterling's entire European distribution network almost collapsed because of a server migration error that Grant himself had championed. He did not know that I manually coordinated the rerouting of 45 cargo jets while sitting on my kitchen floor in pajamas, ensuring Sterling did not lose a single cent. Sterling did not even know. I never told him. That is the job. The client sleeps well because I do not. The chief executive officer, looking nervous and slightly apologetic, ushered Grant over to me after the meeting. Grant, this is Harvey, the CEO said, sweating slightly. He handles the Sterling account. It is our keystone. Grant smiled, a porcelain smile made of ambition. Harvey, pleasure. I have heard interesting things. You have been on this account for a long time. 7 years, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I offered my hand. His grip was moist and weak, like holding a dead fish. 7 years, he repeated, letting out a performative sigh. That is a lifetime in this industry. Maybe too long. You get complacent. You stop seeing the forest for the trees. My blood temperature dropped about 10 degrees, but my face remained a mask of polite interest. Mr. Sterling values consistency, I stated. He is not fond of change for the sake of change. Grant chuckled. He actually chuckled like I was a child explaining why I believed in the tooth fairy. Oh, Harvey. Everyone loves change if you sell it right. I have been looking at the numbers. The margins on the Sterling account are stagnant. We are overservicing him. Too many hours, too much hand-holding. We are leaving money on the table. We are not selling him a service, Grant, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. We are selling him reliability. If we cut support, he walks. Nobody walks away from a contract this size, Grant said, waving his hand dismissively. He is bluffing. He has got you wrapped around his finger. There is a new sheriff in town now. He ordered me to set up a QBR, a quarterly business review, for next week. I want to meet this guy. And Harvey, I will be leading the presentation. Book it and send me your deck by Friday. I will need to polish it. We need to dazzle him. Lots of graphs, hockey stick growth. You know the drill. I stood there, watching him walk away, checking his phone before he even exited the room. He had just ordered me to construct a bomb and place it directly under the foundation of our $5 billion company. He thought I was just an admin with a fancy title, a relic. He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea that the stagnant margins he complained about were the direct result of me spending company resources to fix internal screw-ups before they reached the client. He did not know that I was the only reason the Sterling account existed at all. I went back to my desk. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering a war drum against my ribs. The security of being invisible was gone, replaced by the deep, unsettling fear that my hard-won competence was simply not valued in this new corporate landscape. They looked at my life's work and saw only fat to be trimmed. This was my internal conflict, realizing that quiet competence was no longer a viable survival strategy. I opened my private drive. I named a new folder the exit. Then I picked up my phone and texted my contact at legal. Hypothetically, I wrote, "And how enforceable is the non-compete regarding clients I brought in prior to the 2018 merger?" The 3 dots bubbled up immediately. The storm was here, and Grant had just handed me the umbrella, unaware that I was about to use it as a weapon. The silence following my text to legal was heavy, the corporate equivalent of filing a flight plan for an emergency exit. My task now was to execute Grant's disastrous QBR plan, and the preparation began the following morning. I walked into the windowless conference room, which felt less like a workspace and more like a minimalist interrogation chamber. Grant was already there, holding court at the 85-inch monitor. He was wearing a fleece vest, the kind of uniform that screams, "I work in venture capital." Even though we dealt in freight shipping, "Harvey," he boomed, "grab a seat. Let us make some magic." I placed my concise, 3-page briefing document on the table. It contained the key performance indicators Sterling actually cared about: on-time delivery rates, customs clearance velocity, and the error reduction metrics from the new Singapore hub. It was clean, it was factual. To anyone outside of logistics, it was boring, but boring meant profitable. Grant, meanwhile, pulled up a 40-slide PowerPoint deck for a 1-hour meeting with a man who checked his watch if you spoke for more than 30 seconds without making a concrete point. "Okay, look at this opener," Grant said, beaming. The first slide featured a stock photo of a diverse group of people high-fiving on top of a mountain. The text overlay read, "Synergizing tomorrow's velocity today." I felt a dull migraine physically spawn behind my left eye. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice level, the training of 7 years keeping my professional mask rigid. "Sterling is not going to like this. The client wants to know why his shipping containers in Hamburg were delayed by 4 hours last month and how we fixed it. That is what he pays us for." Grant waved a hand, dismissing my entire career with a flick of his wrist. "Details, Harvey, details. You are too in the weeds. This is a strategy review. We need to sell the vision. We need him to see that we are an AI-first, blockchain-enabled, cloud-native partner. We do not use blockchain." I pointed out. "It is aspirational." He countered with the sincerity of a used car salesman. He clicked to the next slide. It was a graph where the y-axis was not labeled, but the line went sharply up. "This is what I am talking about," he said. Emotional resonance. We spent the next 3 hours dismantling my work. Every time I tried to insert a slide about operational stability or error reduction, Grant deleted it. "Too dense," he would say, or "boring." My personal favorite was, "This does not pop." He replaced my analysis of the third-quarter fuel surcharge changes with a slide titled, "The Journey to Wow," featuring a cartoon rocket ship. A cartoon rocket ship. The sheer arrogance of presenting this to David Sterling, a man who built his empire on refrigerated trucking and cold storage, was staggering. I tried one last time, a sliver of desperation clawing at my throat. Grant, please understand. Sterling is 70 years old. If you show him a cartoon rocket ship, he is going to think we are actively mocking him. His company moves literal necessities. Grant stopped clicking. He turned to me, the cool boss mask dropping for a second to reveal the petty tyrant underneath. You know, Harvey, I am getting a lot of resistance from you. I was told you were a team player. The accusation hung in the air. The team player trap. The moment you disagree with a bad idea, you are not protecting the business, you are merely being difficult. I am trying to protect the relationship, I said, choosing my words with clinical precision. No, you are trying to protect your turf. Grant snapped, his voice rising. You have been gatekeeping this client for years. Maybe that is why the account is stale. You are afraid of new ideas because they expose the fact that you have been coasting. Coasting. I tasted the word. It tasted like ash and disappointment. I thought about the Christmas morning I spent on a conference call with customs agents in Mumbai, ensuring a perishable shipment cleared inspection. I thought about the time I personally flew to Detroit to deliver a replacement part for Sterling's assembly line because FedEx was snowed in. Look, Grant sighed, checking his Apple Watch. I do not need you to present. Clearly, you are not on board with the new vision. I will handle the talking. You just be there. I do not know. Take notes. Answer technical questions if he gets bogged down. But let me drive. He was demoting me in my own meeting, cutting me out of the conversation I had sustained for nearly a decade. A younger, hotter-headed version of myself would have yelled. I would have gone straight to the chief executive officer. But I looked at Grant, at his unearned confidence and his empty buzzwords, and something inside me shifted. The internal arc turned from avoidance to embracing destruction. I was no longer an employee protecting the firm. I was the architect of his downfall. Okay, I said softly. Grant looked surprised. He expected a fight, not compliance. Okay, you are the vice president. I continued, closing my notebook. If this is the direction you want to take, I will support you. You do the talking. I will just sit in. Great. Grant clapped again. See, that was not so hard. We are going to crush this, Harvey. Pivot to greatness. I walked back to my office. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of holding back the surge of rage. I sat down and opened the exit folder. I created a new document, incident log, date of prep. I detailed the events. VP explicitly forbade me from presenting operational data, instructed me to prioritize aspirational marketing material over key performance indicator reporting, removed me from the lead presenter role. I saved the file. Then I found the calendar invite for the QBR and forwarded it to my personal email address. Finally, I printed out every single slide of Grant's presentation, the rocket ship, the high-fiving mountain climbers, the unlabeled graphs. I put them in a crisp manila folder. If he was going to drive the company car off the cliff, I was going to make sure the dash cam was recording in 4K. My resignation was not yet official, but the preparation for his inevitable failure was complete. I would now wait. The war plan was set. All I had to do now was wait for Grant to pull the trigger on his own downfall, and the first act of my calculated withdrawal was silence. The meeting was 48 hours away. I spent them in a strange, terrifying calm. I did not try to fix his slides. I did not try to warn the chief executive officer. I just did my regular work, answered my routine emails, and waited. It is funny how calm you feel when you realize you have nothing left to lose. Grant thought he was sidelining me. He did not realize he was setting me free. The disrespect he showed, the complete dismissal of my expertise, had freed me from the obligation to protect them. The armor of my professionalism had become a steel cage, and I had just been given the key. I opened my email and drafted the request. I had accrued 6 weeks of sick leave that I had never touched because I was always too busy saving the company. I logged into the human resources portal from home and submitted my request, leave due to medical stress induced. Technically, it was true. Grant Miller was extremely stressful. I did not go into the office on Monday or Tuesday. I was learning the immense power of absence. When you are the one holding up the ceiling, you do not need to push it down on top of them. You simply have to step away and let gravity do the work. The chief executive officer's name appeared on my cell phone screen multiple times. I ignored them all. Grant's panicked texts arrived in a steady stream. their tone shifting from arrogant command to thinly veiled begging. On Monday, Grant, still confident in his new authority, wasted no time. He enacted his first major corporate pivot. He sent a memo to the Sterling account team, which now consisted of 2 terrified junior analysts and him, stating that all non-critical communication with the client would be routed through a central ticketing system. No more direct calls, no more texting, just tickets. For a client moving time-sensitive perishable goods across 40 international borders, this was less a strategy and more an act of war against reality. The chaos escalated on Wednesday. I was sitting at my kitchen table, reviewing my non-compete clause for the 10th time, when my phone vibrated. It was a message on LinkedIn, sent directly to my personal account. The sender was Kevin, a sweet, hyper-competent junior analyst I had been mentoring. He knew better than to use company channels. Kevin messaged, "Harvey, I know I should not message you, but I am literally shaking. Grant told us to ignore the priority flag on the Munich shipment, claiming it was a system glitch. It was not a glitch. It was vaccines. They have been sitting on the tarmac for 12 hours. They are spoiling." I stared at the screen. Vaccines. This was not just corporate politics anymore. This was negligence with a lethal component. This was a moral choice. I had all the documentation I needed for a quiet exit. If I intervened now, I risked exposing my hand and giving Grant the chance to claim I was still loyal enough to clean up his mess. But this was medicine. People needed this shipment. I closed my laptop, the weight of the decision settling on me. I sighed, pulled up my contacts, and scrolled down to a number I had not called in years, the Munich airport ground crew manager. I could not fix it officially through Omnicorp's channels, but I could fix it quietly, person to person. I texted the manager. "Check container 4004 Bravo. Temperature gauge might be faulty. Manual override to cold storage as soon as possible. Do it as a favor to me." The response was instant. "Consider it done. But tell your new boss he is an idiot." He filed the paperwork as dry goods. I screenshotted the exchange, added it to the exit folder, and then deleted the original text thread. I texted Kevin back, "Do not worry about Munich. It is handled, but keep your head down. Document everything Grant tells you to do." Back at Omnicorp, the walls were buckling. The chief executive officer, realizing the fire was reaching the ceiling, finally sent his emissary. Linda, the head of human resources, called me precisely at noon. Linda was one of those women who treated the employee handbook like the Bible. "Harvey," she said, her voice dripping with artificial concern, "we are so worried about you. This silence, it is not like you. We are a family here. You cannot just abandon your family because of a little disagreement with a cousin." She actually called Grant my cousin. "I am under a lot of stress, Linda," I said, channeling my inner soap opera actor. "My doctor advised a complete disconnect." "I understand," Linda cooed, "but Grant is really trying to bridge the gap. He feels you are resistant to his leadership. He wants to welcome you back. He is even willing to let you keep your title. You will report to him directly for daily task management." Daily task management. They wanted to micromanage the person who built the department. "Linda," I said, my voice hardening, "did Grant tell you about the Munich shipment?" "The what?" "No, we are talking about your attitude. Harvey, ask him about the vaccines, Linda. Ask him why the client's legal team just downloaded the audit logs for the last 48 hours. The latter part was a calculated bluff. I knew Sterling's lawyers. If they smelled blood, they would be moving fast." "What?" Her voice spiked, finally losing the fake reverence. "I am resting now, Linda. I will update you on my return date next week." I hung up. 10 minutes later, I got a notification on my phone system alert. User G. Miller admin has initiated a full data export of the Sterling account. Grant was panicking. He was trying to find out what I knew, or worse, trying to delete evidence of his own incompetence. He did not realize the system logged every export, including his. I sat back and sipped my cold coffee. The cracks were no longer just in the foundation. The walls were about to collapse. And the best part, I had not even resigned yet. I was still on the payroll, accruing sick pay, while watching them burn the building down around themselves. Then the email I was waiting for arrived. From David Sterling to CEO Grant Miller, CC Harvey, subject notice of contract review. A gentleman effective immediately. We are suspending all new initiatives. We will be conducting a review of our service level agreement violations over the past week. We expect a formal response regarding the Munich incident by the end of day. Postscript: please ensure Harvey is present at the upcoming strategy summit. His absence has been noted. Boom. The storm was no longer looming. It was raining fire. Grant was dead. He just did not know enough to lie down yet. Sterling's email demanding my presence and noting my absence was the signal I needed. It was a clear vindication the client saw me, even when my employer pretended I was invisible. But there was still the danger of walking away from a lucrative career with no safety net. The decision to register my own business was theoretical, until I knew I could survive the legal fallout. I pulled out my employment contract, a document I had barely glanced at since 2016. The key lay in Section 8, Clause B, non-solicitation. The employee shall not directly or indirectly solicit, induce, or attempt to induce any client of Omnicorp. I went over the language 3 times. If I resigned, I could not approach Sterling. But Sterling was the one emailing my personal address. He was the one demanding my presence. Soliciting meant I had to ask him. It did not say anything about him asking me. I decided not to go in on Monday or Tuesday, continuing my medical leave. My work email, which I still monitored on my phone, was a disaster zone. The messages were no longer demanding, they were pleading. Subject: urgent. Sterling shipment stuck in customs. From Grant Miller to Harvey. Harvey, I know you are sick, but we have a situation in Shanghai. Who is the contact for the Port Authority? I cannot find it in the CRM. The ticketing system is backed up. I looked at the email. I knew the contact. It was Mr. Wu. He did not use the customer relationship management software. He used WhatsApp and only answered if you started the message with a specific greeting in Mandarin. I deleted the email. It felt like watching a slow-motion car wreck I was not morally obliged to stop. Grant still had no concept of the specialized human capital required to run this operation. He genuinely believed that the contact information was merely a field in a database. Another one came in an hour later, this time from the chief executive officer. Harvey, we need to talk. Grant says you are ghosting us. The Sterling account is at severe risk. I did not reply. I was learning the power of my own negative space. The company's crisis was directly proportional to my silence. By Wednesday, the noise from their end was about to get a whole lot louder. I was at a coffee shop downtown, drinking a latte that cost $6, doing nothing but reading a book about gardening. I do not garden, but the metaphor of pruning dead branches resonated deeply. The tone of the frantic calls on my phone had shifted from desperation to outright panic. Grant, it turned out, had actually followed through on his trim the fat strategy. He had cut support hours, rerouting all inquiries to the central ticketing system. The failure was not hypothetical, it was operational. The collapse happened on a Thursday afternoon. My phone vibrated again with another message on LinkedIn from Kevin, the junior analyst. Kevin, I am losing it, Harvey. The system glitch last week that you helped with. Grant's team deleted the internal error report. He is telling everyone it was a one-time vendor failure. But now we have a huge new issue in the Singapore hub. Grant told us to ignore the automated alerts from the cold chain sensors because he said they were excessive noise. It is 20 containers of specialty chemicals, and the temperature is critical. If they shift 10 degrees, it is a catastrophic loss. He is just ignoring it. I felt a surge of cold professionalism cut through the passive calm I had adopted. The Munich shipment was vaccines, a humanitarian risk. This was a financial catastrophe, a potential contract killer. Grant was actively hiding a failure that could cost the company millions. I texted Kevin back immediately. Document everything. Copy all alerts and instructions. I knew the temperature variance issue. It was a known bug in the third-party cold chain sensor software that required a manual patch I had built 3 years ago. If Grant had deleted the error reports, he had deleted my patch instructions too. I did not have the power to fix this, not officially. I was on medical leave. But I knew the protocol. I typed a rapid series of messages to the head of the Singapore operations desk, a woman I had trained myself, explaining the manual override sequence for the specific sensor model. I framed it as a precautionary check I was doing from home due to my health concerns. Within 20 minutes, I got a text back from her: done. Variance corrected. Thanks for the heads up, Harvey. If I had waited for a ticket, it would have been too late. I screenshotted the exchange, adding it to the exit folder. I was not stealing data. I was documenting the fact that I was the only thing preventing total collapse while officially being absent and unrecognized. It deepened my conviction. They saw me as expendable. I was proving I was essential. Later that afternoon, the chief executive officer finally gave up on calling me himself. He used Linda again, but this time her voice was thin, losing its artificial concern. Harvey, the chief executive officer needs you back. Immediately. Grant is overwhelmed. The Singapore team is running around like headless chickens, and we have multiple client calls scheduled for tomorrow. I am resting, Linda, I repeated. I will update you next week.
But the contracts, Harvey!
The chief executive officer said he is willing to offer you a vice president title. You can report directly to him. Ask him why Grant's full admin access was used to delete 3,000 lines of historical client communication logs this morning, I said, hitting her with another calculated bluff based on the system alert I had seen. Ask him why his new vice president is trying to destroy evidence instead of fixing the logistics. The silence on Linda's end was no longer polite. It was genuine, terrified shock. I have to go, she whispered. I sat back. The corporate equivalent of the police knocking on the door was now underway. Grant was digging his own grave faster than anyone could have hoped. I had not resigned. But the storm was not just outside the building anymore. It was already inside, and it was about to hit the top floor. All I had to do was wait for the strategy summit on Friday. The tension was almost unbearable, but the sheer confidence in my evidence gave me a cool, surgical focus. Sterling's demanding email, which pulled me from my medically induced leave, was a validation that far surpassed any raise or promotion. The client knew the difference between performance and presentation, and he wanted me. But the immediate transition was a legal tightrope walk, and I needed to secure my footing before the summit. I spent the next morning reading my employment contract, specifically the non-solicitation clause, every word a potential landmine. My deepest fear was that by leaving, I would hand Omnicorp the legal grounds to destroy my career. I could not directly or indirectly solicit Sterling, but Sterling was the one initiating contact, demanding my presence, and criticizing the company's recent failures. The distinction was critical. If Sterling fired them and then hired me, I had solicited nothing. My phone rang again. It was Grant. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, the chief executive officer called. I answered, knowing this was the final attempt at damage control before the public execution. Harvey, the chief executive officer began, his voice strained and noticeably missing its usual bravado. Thank you for picking up. We need to talk about next steps. We are setting up a meeting for Monday morning to discuss your transition back. Grant is fully on board with giving you more autonomy. I am not coming back to transition into anything but my resignation, I stated plainly. I have made my decision. The chief executive officer paused, the silence filled with the noise of his office. Harvey, please. We are talking about a vice president title, reporting directly to me. A 25% increase in compensation. We are prepared to offer you new equity. It is not about the money, I said, and for the first time, it truly was not. It was about the principle. It was about the fact that they looked at 7 years of flawless execution and called it stale, and called me support staff. My emotional arc had crossed a threshold. I was done accepting insults in exchange for a paycheck. If it is not the money, what is it? He asked, genuine bewilderment in his tone. It is the fact that you allowed a junior executive to jeopardize $5 billion worth of contracts, resulting in the spoiling of life, saving medical supplies, and your first move was to ask the person who cleaned it up to lie about it, I retorted. And then Grant tried to delete the evidence. The chief executive officer stammered, scrambling for words. Grant is dealing with a lot of pressure. He is new to the specifics. Mistakes happen. We can contain this? You cannot contain this? I said. Sterling is already involved. He knows what happened in Munich. You received his email. He wants me present at the summit because he needs an honest account of the disaster. That is what he values. I paused for effect, letting my internal conflict, the temptation of the raise versus the deep need for respect, finally resolve. I have been reviewing my non-compete. It is standard boilerplate. It restricts me from soliciting current clients for 12 months. There was a long, cold silence on the other end. The chief executive officer had not expected me to bring up the non-compete. He expected to use it as a threat. "We will enforce it, Harvey," he threatened, his voice dropping to a low, legal rumble. "We will ensure you never work in this sector again." "I understand the clause fully," I countered. "I am not planning to solicit anyone. I am planning to attend the summit as a courtesy to the client, watch Grant's performance, and then take a long vacation." I did not have to tell him Sterling was already offering me an out. I just had to be firm in my legal position. The chief executive officer quickly ended the call, knowing he had lost the leverage of fear. Minutes later, a text popped up from David Sterling's personal number. "He does not know anything, does he? He likes rocket ships." I smiled. The feeling was a deep, satisfied warmth, the emotional reward for my years of thankless effort. I try to please. "I am flying back to Zurich tonight. We need to talk. Not about this contract, about the future. Are you legally exposed? I am reviewing my non-compete. It is standard boilerplate, restricted from soliciting current clients for 12 months. Soliciting means you ask me. It does not say anything about me asking you." He was right. He had already seen the loophole I had identified. My integrity was now my shield. "Correct. Good, sit tight. Let him sweat for a week. I am pausing all renewals. Put the phone down." I put the phone down, the anxiety finally dissolving. I was not walking away into the void. I was being pulled into a new future by the very client they had tried to steal from me. The anticipation for the summit was no longer fear. It was pure, cold excitement. The pieces were set for the final act. I knew I would be resigning, but I decided to time the official letter perfectly. I would deliver it immediately after the summit, maximizing the fallout from my absence. 2 weeks of accrued sick leave and silent preparation had elapsed. Now it was time for the corporate funeral. I dressed for the occasion a dark gray suit, highly polished black leather shoes that clicked like gunshots on the tiled floor, and no Montblanc pen or notebook. I did not need to take notes. I was there to deliver a verdict. When I walked into the office, the atmosphere was different. The silence that had been ominous before was now terrified. Junior analysts looked up at me with wide eyes, like I was a ghost returning to haunt the castle. Kevin gave me a tiny, covered thumbs up from his cubicle. My presence alone was a statement. I had already won the internal battle. I walked straight to the chief executive officer's office. Grant was already there, pacing the length of the carpet. He looked terrible. His perpetual tan had faded to a sallow yellow. His slim-fit suit looked slept in, and the desperation in his eyes was unmistakable. The chief executive officer sat behind his massive desk, looking like he wished he could dissolve into his ergonomic chair. "Harvey," the chief executive officer said, forcing a brittle smile. "Thank you for coming in. We need to reset." "Reset," I repeated, remaining standing. "Look," Grant started, his voice jagged and breaking. "We had a rocky start. Okay, I admit it. I am a disruptor. Sometimes I break things, but we need you back on the box. Sterling is difficult right now." "Difficult," I said. "Or litigious." Grant flinched, the words striking home. "We need you to smooth it over." Grant continued, stepping closer, trying to regain his old authority. "Call him. Tell him the Munich thing was a vendor error. Tell him we are on top of it. Use that charm of yours." He wanted me to lie. He wanted me to cash in 7 years of spotless integrity to cover his 3 days of staggering stupidity. The audacity was breathtaking. "I cannot do that, Grant," I said.
Why not?
He snapped, his voice losing its professional facade entirely. "It is your job. You are the client solutions lead." "Not anymore," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. I placed it squarely in the middle of the chief executive officer's vast mahogany desk. "This is my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today." I saw the immediate spike of panic in Grant's eyes. "I will spend those 2 weeks transitioning my files." I continued, "But I will not speak to the client. I will not lie to the client, and I will certainly not report to him." I pointed at Grant.
You cannot quit.
Grant yelled, his face turning an unhealthy shade of crimson. "We have the summit next week."
You have to be there. Oh,
"I will be there," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Sterling requested my presence. As a courtesy to the client, I will attend. But I will be sitting in the audience, watching you disrupt." The chief executive officer picked up the letter. Harvey, please. Let us talk numbers. A raise, more equity. We can write this whole thing off as a misunderstanding. It is not about the money, I said, repeating the fundamental truth that he could never understand. It is about the principle. It is about the fact that you looked at my work, my life's work, and called it support staff. The memory of the insult was the true fuel for my liberation. I preempted their inevitable threat. I have a non-compete. I know it. I wrote half of it with legal back in 2016. I will not solicit your clients. I will not steal your data. I am going to take a nice, long vacation. You are bluffing. Grant sneered, unable to contain his malice. You have nowhere to go. You are aged out of the market. You think some startup is going to hire a 48-year-old logistics manager. There it was. The ageism, the misogyny inherent in his entire worldview, all packaged in one ugly, desperate sentence. I smiled then, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. The cold anger melted into pure, surgical focus. Grant, I said softly, you think the market is LinkedIn and algorithms. The market is people. And unlike you, I have not pissed off every single person I have ever met. I turned to leave. The chief executive officer stood up. If you walk out that door, he threatened, his own desperation finally showing, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I paused at the door, but did not turn back completely. Grant, I said, my voice carrying the weight of certainty. Be next week. You will not even be working in this industry. I walked out. I went to my desk and started packing, collecting only the essentials, the photo of my dog, my Montblanc pen, and the little crystal award I won 3 years ago for operational efficiency. Kevin rolled his chair over. Are you really leaving? He whispered, panicked. Yes, Kevin, I am. What am I going to do? I scribbled a phone number on a sticky note. You are going to wait 3 weeks. Then you are going to call this number. It is a recruiter I know. She places people in firms that actually pay overtime. He took the note like it was a holy relic. I left the building at 2 p.m. The sun was shining. I felt like I had just dropped a heavy backpack I had been carrying for a decade. I was not going on vacation. I went home, opened my laptop, and registered a new limited liability company, SM Solutions. I did not have any clients yet, but I knew something Grant did not. Sterling was coming to the summit not to renew but to execute, and I had a front row seat. The Q4 Strategy Summit was held at the Ritz-Carlton, a setting designed to project confidence and wealth that Omnicorp no longer truly possessed. Crystal chandeliers, shrimp cocktails, and a room full of investors and board members pretending everything was fine when the stock price was silently plummeting. I wore a crimson shirt under my dark blazer, red the color of blood in the water, the color of the final warning. I was serving out my notice period, technically an employee, but functionally a ghost at the feast. I arrived early and took a seat near the back wall. Grant was already on stage doing a sound check. He looked manic, shouting at an audio-visual technician about the bass levels on his intro music. Yes, he had intro music. The unfortunate choice of Eye of the Tiger. I watched him completely detached, noting the frantic energy that substituted for preparation. The room filled up with key clients and board members. I saw the chief executive officer shaking hands, his smile looking more like a grimace. Grant spotted me in the back. He glared, the color draining from his face. He actually started to make a cutting motion across his throat, then realized a board member was watching him, and he swiftly turned the gesture into an awkward adjustment of his collar. He knew I was there to observe his failure. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. A silence rippled through the hundreds of attendees. It was not just quiet, it was a vacuum of sound. David Sterling walked in. He was not alone. He had his entourage, his chief financial officer, his lead legal counsel, and his chief technology officer. They moved in a phalanx, expensive suits and serious faces, embodying institutional gravity. Grant tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. All right, let us get this party started, he yelled. Welcome everyone to the future of logistics. The music started, the lights flashed. It was embarrassing, like watching a magician perform at a crash site. I want to welcome our most valued partner, Grant said, gesturing dramatically to Sterling. David Sterling. David, come on down. We have a special seat for you right here in the front. Sterling did not move. The spotlight swung over to him, illuminating his stone face. I am fine where I am, Sterling said. His voice did not need a microphone, it carried perfectly. Oh, okay, Grant stammered, pivoting without missing a beat. Well, folks, let us dive in. As you know, Omnicorp has been pivoting to a lean, agile methodology. Grant launched into his presentation. The rocket ships were back. The buzzwords flew like shrapnel: paradigm, synergy, blockchain. He paced around the stage making big, sweeping, meaningless gestures. I watched Sterling. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at his hands, folded on the back of a chair, perfectly still. 10 minutes in, Grant put up a slide titled "The Case Study. Sterling Global, a partnership reimagined." It showed a graph of efficiency savings. Grant claimed that by streamlining communication, the ticketing system, they had saved 20% in operational costs. He was selling his failure as a feature. Sterling leaned over to his chief financial officer and whispered something. The CFO nodded and handed Sterling a slim folder. Grant kept talking. And we believe this model is scalable. We can do this for all of you. Sterling stepped forward, taking 2 deliberate steps into the aisle. Excuse me, he said. Grant stopped, mid-sentence. David, we usually save questions for the end, buddy. This is not a question, Mr. Miller, Sterling said. He walked down the center aisle. The room parted for him like the Red Sea. He reached the stage and stood at the bottom, looking up at Grant. That graph, Sterling said, his voice quiet, raspy, and dangerous. The efficiency savings. Yes, impressive, right? Grant beamed. Those savings came from firing the support staff who monitored my cold chain. Sterling announced, his voice booming now through the silent room, which resulted in $400,000 of spoiled pharmaceuticals in Munich last Thursday. A gasp went through the room. Board members sat up straight. Grant's smile instantly faltered. That was a glitch. We fixed it. No, Sterling corrected him. You did not fix it. Harvey fixed it from a coffee shop while he was on medical leave. Grant looked at me, 120 feet across the room. The entire room turned to follow his gaze. I felt the spotlight hit me, but I did not shrink from it. Sterling continued, addressing the silent executives and clients. I do not have a contract with Omnicorp, Mr. Miller. I have a contract with competence, and it seems competence has left the building. He turned to the board of directors. I am invoking the immediate termination clause of my contract due to gross negligence. The chief executive officer leaped up.
David, please! You cannot do that!
I just did, Sterling said simply. My legal team filed the papers 10 minutes ago. He turned back to me. Harvey, he said. Are you coming? I stood up. I picked up my clutch. I walked down the aisle. I walked past the chief executive officer, who looked like he was having a stroke. I walked past the astonished investors. I met Sterling in the aisle. Where are we going? I asked quietly. Lunch, he said. And then to talk about your new consultancy. I have some friends who are very unhappy with their current logistics providers. We walked out of the ballroom together. The doors clicked shut behind us, drowning out the feedback from the microphone, which screeched and wailed, covering Grant's desperate stuttering. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The liberation was complete, and the vengeance was public. My emotional arc had reached its zenith self. Respect had been brutally, beautifully asserted. The sound of the microphone feedback screeching behind me was, truly, the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Sterling and I walked out of the Ritz-Carlton and went to a steakhouse down the street, one with white tablecloths and waiters who did not introduce themselves by name. The sudden absolute quiet of the restaurant was a perfect balm after the corporate explosion. Sterling ordered a bottle of wine that was older than Grant. He raised his glass. To disruption? He toasted, a twinkle in his eye. To competence, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. By the time the appetizers arrived, my phone was vibrating off the table. I had turned it on after exiting the hotel. I let it vibrate, watching the names appear: Grant, the chief executive officer, Linda. Then came the text from Kevin, my embedded spy. Holy cow, Harvey. The chief executive officer is screaming. Grant is crying, literally crying. Security is escorting him out. I smiled and turned the phone face down. Sterling cut into his steak. SM Solutions, he said. Tell me about it. It is a boutique firm. I improvised, instantly sketching the business plan I had been developing for weeks. specializing in high-touch, crisis-proof logistics for legacy clients. No apps, no tickets, just answers. I will take a retainer, Sterling said. Same rate as Omnicorp was charging me, but you keep the overhead. I did the mental math instantly. If I took Sterling's account at the agency rate without the agency bloat and incompetence, I would make more in a month than I made in an entire year at Omnicorp. Deal, I said. Good. Sterling confirmed. I have 3 friends, chief executive officers of major manufacturing firms. They were in that room. They just texted me. They want your number. Send it. While we ate, the apocalypse was happening back at the Ritz. The board held an emergency meeting in the hallway, according to Kevin. The stock had dropped another 8% in the hour since Sterling walked out. News travels fast on Wall Street, and the walkout was already a signal that the ship was sinking. Grant was fired before he could retrieve his coat. Security walked him out through the kitchen so he would not be seen by the remaining investors. Over the next 48 hours, Omnicorp lost 4 more major accounts. All of them called me. I did not solicit them. I simply answered the phone. Harvey, we heard what happened. Can you take us on? I can, I told them. But my rates have gone up, and I do not do PowerPoint. I used the remainder of my notice period to transition files properly and professionally, as I had promised. I hired Kevin a week later. I doubled his salary and gave him the title of Director of Operations. He cried when I told him. I rented a small office in a brownstone, not a glass tower. It had hardwood floors, living plants, and a rule that no meeting could last longer than 20 minutes. The lawsuit from Omnicorp came, of course. They tried to sue me for poaching. Sterling's lawyers responded with a letter citing the breach of contract and negligence regarding the Munich shipment, backed by my meticulous documentation in my exit folder. Omnicorp dropped the suit in 3 days. They could not afford the discovery phase. They knew exactly what I had in the exit folder. Grant tried to reach out on LinkedIn a month later. Hey Harvey, no hard feelings, right? Business is business. I am launching a new crypto logistics startup, Reckless Innovation Chief Executive Officer. Would love to pick your brain. I did not block him. I did not reply. I just left him on read, because that is what support staff does. We support, and when we stop supporting, the whole thing falls down. 6 months later, SM Solutions had 12 employees and handled $12 billion in logistics contracts. We did not have a strategy vice president. We had a coffee machine that actually worked. I bought the brownstone building. I was sitting in my office looking out at the rain when I saw the news alert. Omnicorp announces restructuring, selling logistics division to private equity firm for pennies on the dollar. They were being chopped up for parts. The brand equity Grant talked about was worthless. The legacy they despised, the true competence, was the only thing that had value. It had walked out the door in a crimson blazer. I took a sip of my espresso. Grant was right about one thing: we did need to trim the fat. He just did not realize that he was the fat. They were symptoms of a disease, the disease of thinking, that shiny new things are better than things that actually work, and that the people who do the work are interchangeable cogs. They forgot the golden rule of mechanics: you do not anger the person who holds the wrench. My phone rang. It was Sterling. Harvey, he said. I am in Tokyo. The port is congested. They are saying 3 days delay. I am already on it, David, I said, spinning my Montblanc pen in my fingers. I rerouted the shipment to Yokohama an hour ago. Trucking is arranged. You will lose 4 hours, not 3 days. There was a silence on the line. A comfortable, expensive silence. You are worth every penny, Harvey. I know. I hung up. I looked at the exit folder on my desktop. I dragged it to the trash. Empty trash. Yes, I did not need the insurance anymore. I was the insurance. I turned back to my work. The rain washed the city clean. For the first time in 7 years, I did not feel like I was holding up the sky. I was just flying in it. The emotional closure was complete. The fear of being undervalued was replaced by absolute self-ownership.